Hey friends, in this video, I'm explaining the entire PMBOK Guide 7th edition. If you want to master the most important concepts from the PMBOK Guide for your CAPM or PMP exam, download my free cheat sheet at alvinthepm.com/PM7. Check out all links in the description bar down below. Now, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition itself is divided into two areas. First is a standard for project management, and second is the guide itself. The standard for project management goes over the entire system for how we deliver value to our organizations, along with the 12 principles which guide our behavior to lead and manage our projects, solve problems, and make decisions. The 12 principles are as follows. First, we act as stewards with integrity and trustworthiness, so we're always held responsible for our actions. Next, we're focused on creating a collaborative team environment so there's a free flow of information among everyone. Third, we always strive to have engagement from our stakeholders so there aren't any hidden surprises and everyone's always aligned on key decisions. So the key thing here is you want to deliver as much value as soon as possible to our customers. Next, we should adopt a systems level thinking so we see things from the 100,000 foot level and we manage different dependencies with other projects. The next biggest principle is that we should embrace the qualities of a leader. So what that means is we should outwardly be sharing a vision with the team, driving inspiration, motivating others, and also sharing empathy. Remember, a leader influences and motivates people towards one specific goal. The seventh principle is that we tailor our project management approach with how the team's work will be completed and which processes will end up following based on the context and the situation. The eighth principle is that we build 100% quality into our product and our processes so we're continuously satisfying our customers' needs. Next is being proactive to navigate the complexity and the uncertainties that are tied to the project and the technology that's being created by using lessons learned and the willingness to experiment and learn quickly. The next principle is to always manage risks and implement risk responses so we can decrease the likelihood and the severity of negative risks and increase the positive impact of positive risks. The 11th principle is to be adaptable and resilient with your project plans. Be flexible and don't always stick to one method. That way you can quickly recover from an issue or a failure. And the last principle here is to be a change agent who helps your organization achieve its desired future state. As we go on to the PMBOK Guide itself, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Moving on to the PMBOK Guide itself, there are actually 8 performance domains to maximize our project success. Domain number 1 is optimizing how we engage our stakeholders, continuously growing positive relationships with them so we're always aligned and making decisions that drive the project forward. Identifying stakeholders is a continuously ongoing activity, and we should analyze each person based on his or her interest, impact, influence level, and power. Ask yourself the question, which stakeholders have the highest level of influence and the most interest in your project who you need to win over and gain their support? Pro tip from me, you want to focus your efforts with engaging the stakeholders who have the highest level of power and the highest level of interest. Domain number 2 is optimizing your team's performance by empowering your team members and creating an environment where everyone has an equal accountability and ownership of their work. One way to do this is by adopting the mindset of a servant leader, where you encourage the growth and the development of others, you remove any obstacles, and you shield the team from outside influences so they continue to stay focused on their work. The second way to optimize your team is by laying the foundations for your team's culture with these 7 principles. Take a screenshot right here for your reference down the road. The third way to optimize your team's performance is by adopting the characteristics of a leader. Leadership in of itself is a huge topic, but what it means here in the PMBOK Guide is setting the vision for your team, thinking critically, and finding ways to motivate others based on their intrinsic or their extrinsic needs and of course your interpersonal skills. So basically, that's emotional intelligence, decision making, and conflict resolution. Emotional intelligence is one of the most important areas that we can develop as a leader. So take a screenshot right here so you can visualize the 4 key areas with identifying and controlling your own emotions and being aware of those around you. The third domain is the development approach and project lifecycle. The biggest takeaway from this section is understanding the difference between a predictive, adaptive, and a hybrid approach. The predictive approach, also known as the waterfall approach, involves an extensive amount of upfront planning before any work actually starts. It's called waterfall because each phase happens one after the next, and each phase must finish before the next one starts. The product or deliverable that you're creating is delivered at the very end of the project. So it's best practice to use a predictive approach when requirements are not expected to change frequently. If there are any changes to your project scope, you would use a formal change control process and approve or reject them using change requests. Here's an example of what a predictive project lifecycle would look like from feasibility to project closure. The adaptive approach means that you use incremental and/or iterative approaches to create and deliver the product to your customer. Let's dive into what incremental means. For a strictly incremental development approach, a deliverable is created throughout a series of iterations. There would be 3 iterations of plan, design, and build, and this entire set of activities would repeat until the final product is ready to be deployed to the customer. Each subsequent build adds another layer of functionality onto the initial build, which means that the final deliverable would be considered complete only after the final iteration. In comparison, an iterative approach means that a fully functional deliverable is created after every single iteration, which could be considered acceptable and in usable condition by your customer, aka your minimum viable product. So with that in mind, if you're following an adaptive approach, then you're using the Agile framework where you use short time box windows, which could be 1 week or 2 weeks, to create the deliverable with your team. And at the very end of your iteration, you're going to demo the minimum viable product to obtain the customer feedback. Before the next iteration starts, that's when you'll prioritize your backlog and repeat the cycle until a final product is delivered to your customer. A hybrid approach combines the different elements of a predictive and an adaptive approach. Domain number 4 is all about planning your project at the appropriate level of detail while taking into consideration your project's requirements, schedule, budget, resources, procurement of material, and how you'll manage communications with your team. Before you can plan your project schedule or your budget, you need to work with your team to create estimates. And a few areas that you want to consider are accuracy, precision, confidence level, and the estimated range. When you're developing your project schedule, there is actually a 4 to 5 step process which the PMBOK guide recommends for either predictive and agile projects, and I'll list them on the screen right here. Take a screenshot for your future reference. 2 techniques that you can use to refine your schedule are, first, schedule compression, where you shorten the duration of a task by adding resources to complete it. And second, shortening the length of a task by having tasks be performed in parallel. In terms of planning a project's budget, think of costs as broken up into the following. At the most detailed level, your project's activity cost estimates are summed up to form your cost baseline. Your cost baseline combined with your contingency reserve equals your project's budget, and the total budget amount equals your project budget plus your management reserves. The contingency reserves are allocated to address your known unknown risks that you identified with your team, while management reserves are allocated for the quote-unquote unknown risks. Domain 5 is all about managing your team's work so you can optimize their performance and be on the right path to delivering your product to the customer. There are a few best practices to optimize how you manage your team's work, and I'll list them on the screen right here. In general, project management is a continuously balancing act where you're going to have to compromise, do trade-offs with your team and leadership to satisfy your customers' needs while also delivering the highest quality product possible. One of the other big takeaways here is you want to only use the processes which make the most sense and that you always tailor as needed so you're using your team's time, money, and effort in the most efficient and effective ways. Another thing to keep in mind here is that 90% of our jobs as project managers is communicating the right information to the right person at the right level of detail. So all that means is after you collect any information, you want to distribute it according to your communications management plan so that the intended audience receives and understands the message that you sent out. From the procurement management standpoint, make sure that you understand that the following documents need to be placed before you sign a purchase order with your vendor: request for proposal, statement of work, terms and conditions, and a non-disclosure agreement. Domain number 6 is about project delivery. In other words, are we meeting all of our scope, quality, and requirements so that we can create deliverables that meet our customer needs, which will realize our intended outcomes? If you're following a predictive approach, deliverables are delivered to the customer at the very end of the project. But if you're following an agile approach, deliverables are shown to the customer continuously throughout the project's lifecycle, which helps you obtain their feedback much faster. To make all of this happen, you need to hone in on what's inside and outside the scope of your project and to always collect requirements during the planning phase of your project. You can do this through interviews, focus groups, data analysis, or by using prototypes to capture evolving requirements. You want to document this into a requirements traceability matrix or a similar document so you can manage your project requirements continuously and make sure that everything has been agreed upon by all your stakeholders. The other key area the PMBOK guide discusses is what's known as the cost of quality, which is about investing the right amount of funds into quality prevention tools to prevent failures and defects from reaching your customers. There are 4 categories that's associated with the cost of quality, which I'll show on the screen right here: internal failure, external failure, prevention, and appraisal. As project managers, I recommend that you do everything you can to build quality into your processes the first time around. And my rationale for that is that it's so much easier to fix an issue much earlier on in the project during design instead of much later on when the product has already been manufactured at your supplier. Let's go on to domain 7, which is about measurement and continuously evaluating our performance and taking action to maintain our progress. When we say quote unquote measures to track our project success, you can leverage what's called key performance indicators or KPIs. You have leading indicators, which indicate when performance may deviate in a negative way than what you originally anticipated. And then you have lagging indicators, which gives you information after an event or a deliverable has already been completed. For example, your project schedule variance or your cost variance. Whenever you're creating your metrics, it's typically best practice to follow the SMART rule. Be specific with what you're measuring. Make sure that it's meaningful and it's relevant to your business goals. Is it achievable given the constraints and resources that are available to you? And is it relevant and time-bound? The PMBOK guide covers a wide range of different metrics you can use that's broken up into one of the following categories that I'm showing on the screen right here: baseline, business value, deliverables, delivery, resources and stakeholder, and forecasted metrics. Domain 8 is focused on navigating projects with risks and uncertainties by being aware of our own environment, understanding the dependencies between our activities, and being proactive to address risks before they become issues so we can increase the chance of our project being successful. In one sentence, uncertainty means that nothing can be predicted with an exact precision. However, we can respond to uncertainties by collecting as much information as possible, planning ahead, and investigating different options and choosing the one which gives you the best trade-off, while of course always being resilient and responding quickly to any unexpected changes. Risks can be broken up into 2 categories: a positive risk known as an opportunity or a negative risk known as a threat. To deal with threats which might negatively impact or derail your project, you can implement one of the following 5 strategies. You could accept that the threat will take place and not take any direct action to prevent it from happening. You could also avoid and completely eliminate the threat. You could also escalate the risk to leadership if it's beyond your authority. You could also mitigate the risk by decreasing its likelihood and decreasing its impact level. And lastly, you could also transfer the risk to a third party who would then take full ownership of managing and bearing its impact. To deal with positive risks or opportunities, you'll be using analogous strategies that you use for risks, and I'll show them on the screen right here. To plan for these risks, you want to allocate what's called reserves into your project schedule or budget. Think of this as an extra amount of funds or time that can be used to address risks if your project goes behind schedule or over budget. You can use either management reserves or contingency reserves depending on your situation. A contingency reserve is an amount of funds or time to address quote-unquote known unknown risks which your team has already previously identified, brainstormed, and planned risk mitigation responses and strategies. On the other hand, a management reserve is an amount of funds or time to address quote-unquote unknown risks, what's known as your unforeseeable situations that your team did not originally account for. Now, the next chapters in the PMBOK guide goes over how to tailor your project to meet your needs and the different models, methods, and artifacts that you can use to lead your projects. For the full deep dive into all these concepts, watch this video next because it's my full free comprehensive course into the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, and I'll see you in the next video.